Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful August the 30th, 2019. Grando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, everyone's ecstatic down here. I mean, we got such a wealth of sports going on right now, from college football to professional football. Major League Baseball is going crazy, and the U.S. Open up in Flushing Meadows.
Yep.
Everybody's knocking the ball over the net.
Yeah, it's a great time of year, and I just hope that everybody can have fun closing out this beautiful month of August, going into the great month of September, where a lot of good things are happening. I want to say there's so much going on in sports, in baseball, football. And, I think about even basketball. A lot of talk about basketball. Just a lot of good things happening. Tennis in New York City. New York City. It's a lot of good things happening. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So, Big C, I know you talk about all the football that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. We have Big C's Friday Night Lights coming up and a lot of good things coming up. I want to ask you, are you barbecuing? I know there's a lot of storms coming down south. Do you still barbecue in the storms, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, sometimes you don't want to go outside and having all that lightning flying around you. And when you're using these metal grills and pits, Charlton, it's not very intelligent to stand next to them.
That's very true. So hopefully you can cook from the oven this time. I do want to say that Big C Sports is brought to you by Google and Alexa. You can say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast, and you'll see our platform come up. And I really appreciate that growth. I also want to ask you, when it comes to all the stuff that we talk about, I always am appreciative that my mind is brought back to this National Suicide Hotline that we have. It's 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Again, Big C, why is it so important that we talk about this all the time? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's like the holidays that come up all the time. We got this great Labor Day weekend that's coming up, Charlton. Just like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number. It's something that should be thought about all the time, because there's so many people out there that are in desperate need of help, don't know where to go, don't have the funds to go seek professional help, on a personal one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
But this number is there. We have so many veterans that are in dire strait and dire needs, Charlton, just of affection, just someone to talk to, someone to think about them. So we have this National Suicide Prevention Hotline number that we give out all the time. We lose some 20 veterans a day, Charlton, unfortunately, in this country to suicide. That number needs to be down to 0. We need a little more help from our national government, Charlton, as far as being intervention, in these veterans' lives, Charlton.
Yeah.
But this number is a start. For the veterans and people who know somebody who may be struggling, this number is a start. Don't hesitate in calling it.
Yeah, that's a very good shout-out, Big C. I want to just run into tonight's Happy Friday. I wish everyone in the universe a great Friday going into this beautiful holiday weekend. And I want to start with tonight's high school football, Big C's thoughts. We do the national top 10 high school football programs. I don't know who counted all this. There have to be 100,000 high schools in this country. I don't know how they came up with the top 10, but it's just our thoughts, and we can have your thoughts on it too. Big C, #1, Mater Dei of Santa Ana, and they started last week with a 42-12 win over Corona Centennial. Tonight they play Villa Park out of California. #2, St. Francis Academy out of Baltimore, Maryland. They beat Central High School of Miami, Florida, 49-13. They had to travel to get a game. Now they're playing Simeon on August 31st out of Chicago. Big C, do they know there are a couple of high schools around Washington area? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, and that's one of the problems with those preparatory schools. And, I mean, you think about what type of budget you have to go travel around the country, Charlton, to get on a plane to go play a high school game where there's really not supposed to be that much revenue generated. But this is the problem that comes from high school football, where you have these teams that are stacked. How demoralizing is it? You just talked about one of those scores, 49-13, I believe it was.
Yeah.
How demoralizing is it to the losing team?
Yeah, and that's a good team from Florida. Miami Central's legit, Big C. That team will also travel to California, I believe, in the next 2 weeks to play Mater Dei of Santa Ana, the two-time defending national champion. So somebody's got some money in D.C. Number 3, St. John Bosco out of Bellflower, California, beat DeMatha of Hyattville, Maryland, 35-7. Last week, St. John Bosco and Mater Dei, they're in the same league. They traveled to D.C. last week and beat the number 1 team in the D.C. area. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, these high school kids, Charlton, are getting a great lesson as far as travel, what the prep is for college life.
Yep.
You know, I still go back to the days when I think about when I played my senior year in high school. I think we had 27, 28 players on the team.
Yeah.
And we hardly had we had most players playing both ways throughout that time.
Yep.
So the landscape of high school football has changed dramatically over the years, Charlton, because of the infusion of money, the recruiting of players to come into your district and live and play.
Yep.
So it's changed a lot.
Well, also, they have fun at it. I know it's not fair in life, but they have a great time traveling. Number 4, North Shore out of Houston, Texas. They were idle last week. They'll play Texas State Power, Katy, Texas. Number 5, St. John's out of Washington, D.C. They beat Miami Southridge 48-0, and they will play Deerfield Beach of Florida. So a lot of these top teams, they are traveling. Number 6, IMG Academy out of Bradenton, Florida. They've only lost 1 time in the last 4 years, and that was at Santa Ana Mater Dei of Southern California by the score of 24-21. And now they are playing Venice. They beat Venice of Florida 46-7. They'll play Miami Norland tonight, actually. Number 7, Duncanville, Texas. They were idle last week. They will play Lancaster, Texas. Another big game. Number 8, St. Joseph Prep out of Philadelphia. They were idle last week. They're traveling down to Georgia to take on state champion Marietta, Georgia, Big C. That's a long way from Philadelphia to Atlanta, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's the flight that the NFL teams take, Charlton, when you think about the Eagles and the Falcons playing against each other. But, you know, as we talked about, you know, I would love to see some of the HBCs broadcast like some of the high school games that are talked about on television now on a regular basis to infuse some of that cash back into those historical black colleges.
That would definitely be nice, Big C. The last 2 in Big C's top 10 national high school football, and we wish everybody success with the tailgating and the bands playing, and I hope that they enjoy it. But it's a shame when your team travels 2,000 miles to play a game, a lot of their kids that go to that school can't play. Number 9, St. Thomas Aquinas, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They knocked off Concord de La Salle last week by the score of 24-14. Controversial scores in that game. They play tonight at home versus Virgin Catholic out of Oradell, New Jersey. Here's a school from Florida. Fort Lauderdale's down there near where the Miami Dolphins play. They fly out to Concord, which is close to Oakland, and now they're playing a team from New Jersey. And I remember the coach from St. Thomas Aquinas saying he wants to thank Nike. He didn't thank his boosters. He thanked Nike for the money, Big C. Also, number 10, St. Louis, Honolulu, Hawaii. They're 2-0. They beat Campbell out of Ewa Beach, Hawaii, 48-27. They take on Nevada State Power. Bishop Gorman out of Las Vegas. Again, we saw Arizona go to Hawaii. Now you have a high school team from Las Vegas going there as well, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they got the same type of budget when you think about the funds that are out there in Vegas. I mean, anybody can sponsor a high school, Charlton, and I'm going to believe that there's some alumnus out there that are doing quite well.
I'm sure they're doing quite well. So we love bringing you Big C's Friday Night Lights. For a lot of players, we know it's not fair. All is fair in love and war. That means it's an oxymoron. But for the kids that can't get bigger, stronger, and faster to get on these prep teams and travel across the country, you think about this. And I'm all for high school football. I think anything that you want to fix, you got to talk about it. There are some high school football that will travel 3,000 miles away to play a game, and sometimes they'll do it twice. There's some Division I college programs from the West Coast that will not play past or east of the Mississippi River. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I always look at this, you know, as far as the disadvantage to those kids that don't have the funding in their high schools. We look at high school as building years for these young athletes. And think about how some of them get demoralized when they walk out on the field and they look across the field and you basically see a college team standing on the other side of the field.
Yeah.
You know that the score is going to be run up on you, but how does that affect those kids that are losing?
Yeah.
Emotionally. I mean, we all like winners in sports. You know, everything is about the W and about the L.
Yep.
But you also got to put the D in there when you're demoralizing some of these kids, and I understand why they have to travel such a distance to go find somebody who can be competitive with them.
Yeah.
But no high school has a budget where they can be on the road, 8 games out of the year to go play those type of games. So I think that high schools need to really take a in-depth look at that, Charlton.
Yeah.
How they create these disadvantages with these preparatory schools, Charlton, versus just a mainstream high school that kids have to go to.
I agree very much so, Big C. I also want to just bring up, because a lot of programs in Florida have moved some of their games around. I don't know if they've canceled some, but I know with Hurricane Dorian coming in, expected to hit Florida by the weekend, I just hope that people can please be prepared and listening to all the emergency warnings. I know you're down south, Big C. Oftentimes you're in the eye of the storm. And I know we talk about the 800 number and we talk about call 911. But how important is it, because you've seen it firsthand, that people really heed the warning when the authorities say get out of town, at least for a couple of days? Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, unfortunately, enough people are not intelligent enough to realize that they want to stay behind. They say they want to protect their belongings. You can't hold back the water. I don't care how many sandbags you put up or whatever. If it's going to flood, it's going to flood. But it's best to save your life and your family's life in moving out of the way and heed the warnings of the national weather forecast, Charlton, when it's coming your way. Property, this is the reason why you buy insurance.
Yeah.
You have insurance to protect your property. If you're living in a hurricane alley, then make sure you have hurricane insurance, you have flood insurance.
Yeah.
But don't sit there and risk your life because you own a piece of property.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so even we're going to get ready and cover some college football in just a bit, but Florida State, the big game with Florida State and Boise State, that's been moved from Jacksonville up further north to Tallahassee. So it will be a home game for Florida State. So if a major college can realize what you just said, Big C, and they will move the game a few hundred miles away, then, and they have resources. They have a lot of people, as you said, they stay behind. It's to their peril. Again, just pay attention to the authorities and please leave if you can. I want to go up north to New York City. New York City is a great place, if you don't mind some of the stench in the subways and the rats that are as big as cats, Big C. I mean, I saw a rat. It made me walk the other way. You know how sometimes they say, don't walk down the alley when somebody is approaching you? A rat made me turn around in New York City, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, there's some rodents in the northeastern seaboard that have grown to enormous size. I mean, they have a lot of things to consume when they're there. And I've been in towns, in the northeast, Charlton, and I've been fearful at night walking up and down the street.
Yeah, it's not the people, it's the rats that'll get you in New York City. But they find a way to clean things up too. I want to say this beautiful tennis tournament that's happening in New York. And I know there's some people complaining about, well, the stars get to determine when they play or not. Well, that's how it is in life. But really, a breath of fresh air. We talked about high schools, Big C's Friday Night Lights. These kids are 15, 16, 17, sometimes 18 years old. 15-year-old Coco Gauff. She'll play the defending champion, Naomi Osaka, Saturday in New York City. Big C is must-see tennis. And when you think about, she's not even old enough to drive a car, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it all depends on where you live at, whether you're old enough to drive a car, Charlton. But Naomi Osaka, is last year's defending champion from the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
And last year in the U.S. Open, Charlton, she defeated her idol, Serena Williams, in the finals. I mean, it was a very emotional trophy ceremony for her. Sitting there, she broke down because she had beat the woman that inspired her to become a great tennis player.
Yeah.
This year, Charlton, she's having to fight the rising U.S. star in Coco Gauff.
Yeah.
And you think about what Naomi Osaka has had to go through the 2 years, Charlton. The two queens of American tennis, she's had to face them on their home turf.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to be an epic match when you think about the rise of Naomi Osaka last year and the rise of Coco Gauff this year, Charlton.
Yep.
This is going to be must-see tennis. And, I mean, this is what the tennis world has been waiting on. The young, up-and-coming stars, and we seem to have two of them budding right in front of our eyes.
Isn't it amazing how much tennis, in the heart of football and in the heart of baseball, tennis is starting to dominate. And when you think about how important it is just for every woman that wants to go out there. You're on your own. You can't blame your teammate for a dropped ball. You can't do any of that, Big C. And so I really just appreciate how hard the women compete. And when you think about tennis, and you think about the most U.S. Open round of 16 appearances, think about this. In the universe, you have 4 women that have 16 rounds or more. Venus Williams at 15, Martina Navratilova at 18, tied with the great Serena Williams, and they all trail Chris Evert, Big C. And that's how important it is. And so in this era right now of tennis, it's amazing how 2 women from the same family have grown up to dominate tennis, and there's 4 women ever to do that, and 2 are sisters, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, those sisters have been epic battlers of each other. When you think about the U.S. Open, Charlton, they've constantly faced each other in that tournament, so they've become rivals of their own in that.
Yeah.
You're talking about Chrissy Evert and Martina Navratilova, Charlton. They carried tennis in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
They were the face of women's tennis around the world. Martina Navratilova was the most dominant player on the planet during that time. Chrissy Evert had tons of appearances in finals all over the globe. But you look at the Williams sisters, what they've done as far as in the 2000s, as far as carrying that torch for American tennis, Charlton, and they're the face. They don't get notarized as much as everybody else, but to have 2 African-American women be the face of U.S. tennis, and with a third one coming along in Coco Gauff, that's a marvelous time to be alive as an African-American in America.
Well, it really is. So I wish them well. Got a couple of friends in New York City that are going to be attending that event, so I really look forward to seeing what happens in that tournament, Big C. I want to turn the page to, I know I love high school football, and I love college football, and the NFL, of course, is king. But I want to get your thoughts. We're going to do Big C Sports college football games. We don't cover everyone, but just some, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Again, everybody has their own opinion. I want to go to last night, and Chip Kelly, is he really the hire for UCLA? I know you said it's going to take some time, but also he failed at San Francisco for the Niners. I think he had medium amount of success in Philadelphia. So now they bring him out of the TV booth and he's on the sidelines at UCLA. It's going to take some time to build up that program. But if you're the Pac-12, you've already lost to Arizona, lost at Hawaii, which is the Mountain West Conference, and then UCLA lost at Cincinnati. Now, there's a big game with Fresno State and USC coming up, and I'll talk about that. But when you saw what happened with UCLA, I think their quarterback completed 8 passes last night. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I wasn't surprised that UCLA went in and lost down at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They lost to them at home last year, and as I mentioned, the best player on UCLA's offense was a transfer from UC Davis.
Yeah.
Nobody in the Pac-12 would even recruit the kid.
Yeah.
But when you look at this UCLA team, and everybody wants to give Kelly a lot of credit for what he can do, you have to understand when he got the job at Oregon, Mike Bellotti, the cabinet full. It wasn't like he walked in and had to rebuild.
Yeah.
All he had to do was just not turn off the car because it was already running.
Yeah.
And so Chip Kelly has gotten a lot of praise for something he's never accomplished. That's how you have to really look at it. Oregon was already stacked with players and talent.
Yeah.
They had risen to the heights in the Pac-12 at that time.
Yeah.
So all he had to do was just steer the ship, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
But when he left and he had to go try to rebuild programs on his own on the college level and professional level, Charlton, the success has not been there because the players haven't been in place.
Well, you said that Lawrence and Clemson would put up 50 last night. I thought 50 for week 1. I didn't believe they could. But he got picked a couple of times. But they actually went over the 50 mark, Big C. And you're right, Georgia Tech, why would they change their whole scheme that made them successful over the past decade? Well, only they can answer that question. But Clemson looks pretty unstoppable, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Travis Etienne looked unstoppable last night. The running back had over 200 yards on just 15 carries in the game and a couple of touchdowns, Charlton. I watched Lawrence. He seemed to struggle in that game. He was not sharp.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was first game jitters, all the pressure from the hype of the preseason, Charlton, that leads into the bowl season. But he has a great running back, and he has a solid defense to help him out this year.
Yeah, and so the great Herm Edwards out at Arizona State gets a win last night in the desert. It was 102 degrees at a 7 o'clock kickoff in the desert, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it's always hot in Arizona. The thing that I looked at the most from that game, Charlton, and took out of it, is that the lack of attendance there in Arizona.
Yeah.
You would have thought, with the season starting, you got the coach in his second year, you got a true freshman starting at quarterback, that you'd have had a little more fan backing. And that's one of the problems we've talked about with the Pac-12, is that people are just not engaged to go out to the games. And so that's the reason why they don't get much luster on television.
Yeah, it's hard to back a conference where their own fans don't back them. I want to look at tonight's schedule. There's a lot of game coming up on Friday and Saturday. Tonight, number 17, Wisconsin, they're down there in the eye of the storm at South Florida. And I don't know how the weather is affecting it, but it's a grass surface, so it might slow some people down. But Wisconsin's favored by 10 on the road. The Bulls started 7-0 last year at Big C before they lost their final 6, but there's still a lot of talent down at that program, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they struggled at quarterback. Bennett struggled at quarterback in the latter part of the year after getting off to a hot start, Charlton. Taylor at Wisconsin, the running back, one of the best running backs in the country. Wisconsin is going to be starting a new quarterback this year, so they have to get in the sync, offensively, Wisconsin, but those big boys up in the north can play.
Yeah, Tulsa at number 20, Michigan State, and that's a game that's also played on grass. Michigan State, the Spartans are favored by 23, should be an easy win over Tulsa. And then you have Purdue going out to Nevada, and that's a game that starts tonight about 9:30, but that's going to be on artificial turf, so it may give Nevada a chance to hang with them out of the Big Ten power. Purdue is only a favorite. They got an 11-point favorite going into that game, but I wouldn't be surprised if they got knocked off. In fact, some people had the point spread down about 9, but they're playing on the road in Nevada. Sometimes it can sneak up and bite people. I want to get your thoughts on an in-state rival, Colorado at Colorado State. That game's going to be played in Denver. It's also on grass, and Colorado out of the Pac-12. They got to win this game. They're favored by 13. Your thoughts?
Well, once again, the Pac-12 is in peril. When you look at the Pac-12 conference, you can't find one dominant team in the conference. I know Oregon has gotten a lot of preseason hype.
Yeah.
We saw Colorado fall flat on his face in the second half of the season last year after getting in the national ranking.
Yeah, and last night, it may be a good or a bad thing. It's good that Utah blew out BYU by 20 points, but also if the team that wins your conference has a stadium that holds 47,000, I know that Pac-12 doesn't want that, Big C. I would think they're rooting against their own teams. Your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at the position Washington State was in last year.
Yeah.
Up in Pullman, they got a stadium that only seats about 37,000.
Yeah.
And they came within a score of knocking off Washington for the Pac-12 title. So, when you look at the Pac-12 overall, Charlton, they've reduced stadium sizes out there, so they're not going to compete on the national scale attendance-wise. They probably have they're the lowest attendance of all the Power 5 conferences.
Yeah, well, some things can change on that, especially when you're playing on 102-degree at kickoff at 7 o'clock. I want to jump to Saturday. A bigger matchup that may be getting attention. Lane Kiffin takes Florida Atlantic, and they're playing at Ohio State, ranked number 5 preseason. That's a noontime kickoff. They're on artificial turf, but the Buckeyes are favored by 27, and they do have a new coach. Big C, your thoughts?
They have a new coach, they have a new quarterback, but they also have a lot of the same old philosophy they had. If you look at Ohio State, its first 3 games of the season last year under Ryan Day, they averaged about 57 points a game.
Yeah.
So the Buckeyes, in this system that they run with Ryan Day, I see them being a high-powered, electrifying offense. I like what Lane Kiffin does, Charlton, because he brings in the best athletes left over in Florida. And he's gotten the most out of them in his 2 seasons there.
Well, he knows how to coach in big games. Big C, Boise State, there's something going on in college football. Boise State going on the road at Florida, and we know the weather made them move the game from Jacksonville to Tallahassee. You have Purdue coming out to the West Coast, taking on Nevada. Fresno State traveling to USC. Hawaii's already knocked off Arizona. If Boise State goes down to Florida and beats Florida State in their own backyard, that game's going to be played on grass. Would you believe that maybe the most dominant teams on the West Coast will be teams from the Mountain West Conference if they can knock them off? Give me your feeling on how Boise State has to feel going into Florida State's home field now, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Boise State has traveled over their history, Charlton, and knocked off big boys. Years ago, I think about 2011, they went down to Georgia and opened up a game there in Atlanta and beat the University of Georgia on their home turf. This is a program in Boise State, Charlton, that's starting a new quarterback this year, so How will he respond to the big game pressure on the West Coast? Willie Taggart's going to be under a lot of pressure down in Tallahassee this year, Charlton, trying to rebuild that Florida State program.
Well, Florida State is only favored by 6.5. So that's not a lot for a team to come about 2,500 miles, and you're a big program like Florida State and only have a 6-point favorite. Eastern Washington, they're playing at the Washington Huskies, ranked number 12 in the country, and that's with the Pac-12 network. Artificial turf at Washington, and the Huskies, there's really not a line of that game. They're probably going to be at least a 3-touchdown favorite. And now, a team that people are knocking around in the paper saying that maybe they're not the number one team in the country anymore. You look at, I know they're your favorite program, Alabama, and they're going to play Duke. That game's going to be in Atlanta. I don't know if that would be a sellout because I don't know how well they're going to travel with Duke's fans for football. But Bama is favored by 32 points, even though they've had some injuries on their team before game one. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, that game will be a sellout. Alabama travels. They're not like the West Coast. Wherever they play, and you think about the proximity being between Alabama and Georgia, they're just one state away, so it's basically like a home game for Alabama.
Yeah.
The tide travels. Duke, they're starting a new quarterback this year. Daniel Jones went to the NFL. Cutcliffe has always been known as an offensive guru. People can talk about Alabama losing players.
Yeah.
But this is a team, when you look at their depth chart, their number ones and their number twos, they're all 4- and 5-star recruits.
Yeah.
There's the same talent that any other top national team would have on their schedule, on their roster, Charlton. So Alabama doesn't miss a player when they lose a player because it's always the next man up.
Let me take you to Idaho at Penn State, and that's a 3:30 kickoff on grass. Penn State's actually a favorite by 39 points in that game, and they should handle Idaho fairly easily, I would think. But I also want to jump to another game that really has a lot of attention with the Big Ten and also the Pac-12. Number 25 Northwestern, which is very tough to beat at home, but they're on the road at number 23 Stanford and David Shaw. That game's going to be on Fox Sports on a grass surface, and Stanford's favorite at home. They only are a 6-point favorite down on the farm, and this is a Stanford team that can dominate running, and they have a good passing game. The spread is kind of close. That surprised me, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this could be the most intelligent major conference game played this year, Charlton, when you think about Stanford and Northwestern, two institutions where you have to be accepted academically before you can take an athletic scholarship.
Yeah.
But Fitzgerald has done a marvelous job of coaching at Northwestern as well as Shaw at Stanford. Stanford has a second-year quarterback that has really developed. He was the best quarterback in the Pac-12 last year, and I expect even better things from him this year.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Portland State's on the road at Arkansas. That's a long way to go. It's on the SEC artificial turf, and Arkansas is favored by 28. Now, I know they're going just because of the money, but I'm going to ask you this question because I know you're anti a lot of the high schools that have these super teams, pretty much all-star teams, and they're traveling all over the country because a lot of the local teams won't play them. Now, Portland State, that's Neil Lomax's school, Big C. What are they doing hanging out in the SEC at Arkansas, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you think about the small conferences in college football, this is where you get a lot of funding.
Yeah.
You have to go on the road and play these games, Charlton, against the big boys.
Yeah.
Because that's where the revenue is. You don't have a broadcast network covering your home games, or you're even a conference, broadcast contract.
Right.
So you have to go on the road, and you got to play the big boys in the Power 5 conferences to get those paydays to keep your athletic program funded. You talked about all the colleges just the other day that have lost their football programs in California.
That's right.
Because that's lack of funding. So if you're not willing to go on the road and play the big boys, your funding will go away and your program will go away.
That's a very good point, Big C. And speaking of that, UC Davis is at Cal Berkeley. They're about 80 miles apart. That's on the Pac-12 network. Artificial turf. And Cal Berkeley's only favored by 17. I know UC Davis got into the Division II program for the playoffs last year, so we'll see what happens with that. Number 3, Georgia. They're at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a better team than people think. That's a 7:30 kickoff on ESPN. It's on artificial turf, and Georgia's only favored by 18 in some polls and 21 in the other. I think they're at least a 30-point winner over that. What are your thoughts on that, Big C?
Well, when we look at college football, I think all the players, they don't look at the lines on the game. They're looking at the W's and the L's.
Yeah.
That's what's important to them because there's no moral victory in covering the point spread in college football. Georgia is a dominant program.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt has improved, but they're not of the caliber that Georgia is. I mean, it's going to be a big party down there in Nashville, nevertheless.
Nevertheless. And speaking of partying, Georgia Southern, they're at number 6 LSU. Orgeron Woolley has the LSU program where they should be. They're favored by 29 points is LSU. And then when you think about Middle Tennessee, they're at number 7 Michigan. And you think about Coach Harbaugh. He's been on a hot seat for so many reasons, but Michigan, they got drubbed last year by Florida. Have to leave a pretty bad taste in the mouth. They're favored by 34 points, Big C, at the Big House. Your thoughts?
Well, Shea Patterson has to step up as quarterback. He's had that year under his belt. And when you look at where they are as a team, Michigan, it's time for them to get on top of the Big Ten. If they don't do that, you got Wisconsin in that conference are going to be strong. Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State, Charleston, they can't afford an early slip-up.
Well, I'm going to say I'm looking forward to a lot of these games. We're going to take what's called the Big C timeout. And when we come back, we're going to finish up on our thoughts of college football and some of the big games. And you and I are going to put a wager. It's just going to be a friendly wager between West Coast and Southern football, at least for one game. We'll do that in just a moment, and we hope that you'll come back and enjoy us as we come back from the Big C timeout. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout on Big C Sports, and we really appreciate what we're doing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports, brought to you by Google and Alexa. Just say Big C Sports on Google and Alexa. You'll hear the program come up. Also, you can follow Big C Sports on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow us on Spreaker. You can follow us on YouTube. Also, if you have a TV set in your home, you can find Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast. And I really do love the opportunities that we're getting from our sponsors. I know that you're talking about football and how big it is. In Texas, Notre Dame, USC, Alabama, when those programs are good, college football is good. Louisiana Tech, Terry Bradshaw's old country, at number 10, Texas. And the Longhorns have their own network. Okay? Texas is favored by 20 points at home on their own network. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Sam Ehlinger is the most underrated quarterback at a major conference this year at Charleston, down at the University of Texas.
Yeah.
Texas, it's time for them to shine. They have to get back on top of the heap. They actually should go out and win the Big 12 title. I would be shocked if Oklahoma won it. They got a new quarterback in Jalen Hurts as Oklahoma. But I think Texas, with all the talent that they put together, Tom Herman, he has to do as Jim Harbaugh does. He needs to win this year.
Yeah, they have to win no matter what, like DJ Khaled. Another big game that I think is bigger than a lot of people think about. On the West Coast, Fresno State, they're at Southern California, and the USC offense is loaded at the wide receiver position. They're not as well known, but they will be by the end of the year. And that game is on grass. It's an ESPN kickoff. It's a late kickoff, 7:30. So that gives a lot of people to come and crowd the Coliseum. And oftentimes when they play, it's in front of the sold-out crowd. Southern Cal's only favored by 13.5. And you might say 13.5, well, that's a lot. But when you think about what Fresno State has done, they've knocked off UCLA, and they've knocked off Arizona State the last 2 times they played programs from the Pac-12 Conference. This is Clay Helton's must-win season, because if they don't win this year, especially this game, you may see him not get through the rest of the year. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of pressure on second-year quarterback J.T. Daniels, Charlton. He had a lot of inconsistency as a true freshman last year. They're going to need to shore up their offensive line. You know that Fresno State can produce a high-powered offense. They always have talented wide receivers. How good will that SC defense be? And you got to understand, they got all the pressure on them at USC.
Yep, I agree.
Fresno State will be playing with house money.
I agree very much, Big C. Just about 3 more games. On a Monday is number 9 Notre Dame at Louisville. Louisville struggled last year. It's on artificial turf, 8 o'clock ESPN start. And Notre Dame is favored by 18 against a depleted Louisville team. That might be a fool's bet. But a game that might shock some people, and if you don't pay attention, you may get knocked off. Number 4, Oklahoma. They're at home versus Houston. And Houston has been known to score points at times. It's a 7:30 start on ABC. It's on grass. And Oklahoma's favored by 23 but they have a new quarterback, Big C, and do you think they'll have a hiccup? Your thoughts?
Well, Markel Queen, the quarterback for the University of Houston, was one of the top passers in the nation last year until he tore up his knee.
Yeah.
He's coming back healthy. They got Dana Holgorsen, their new head coach at Houston. He led that high-powered West Virginia team for the past couple of years, and they put a lot of pressure on Oklahoma. Matter of fact, there was a one-touchdown game when when Oklahoma beat West Virginia. So Dana Holgorsen is very familiar with Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, I don't know if he can be the passer that he was, his predecessor was in Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
What happens with athletes is that you go back to the things that you know. Jalen Hurts likes to run. If he doesn't see that opening right off the back, will he pull it down and run it, or will he be patient? Oklahoma will be in a battle in this game.
I agree with you. That game is going to be under the radar, but it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. The biggest game in the Pac-12 universe over the last couple of seasons, Oregon picked as a Pac-12 favorite, even though Stanford and Washington may have a lot to say about that, even Utah. And if you believe Southern California, they think they'll have a lot to say about it. If you take them on 13th in the country, they're playing at number 16 Auburn down in Arlington, Texas. I'm going to say something really silly. It's just my own opinion. If Oregon wears anything gray, they're going to lose. They always lose big games when they wear gray uniforms. If they wear white or green, they're fine. But that game, a lot of people are excited. 7:30 kickoff on ABC Sports on a grass surface. And Auburn is favored by 3. Auburn has a nasty defensive line, but Oregon has the best offensive line in the Pac-12. I think this is power on power, and I think Hibbert's going to be this deciding factor for the Oregon Ducks. If Oregon wins that game, I'm going to send you out a duck, Big C, okay? But if Auburn wins that game, you can send me out an eagle, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charleston, when you think about this game, Auburn's starting a true freshman in Bo Nix at quarterback.
Yeah.
But you also got to look at Oregon's history. In big games, Oregon has faltered.
Yeah.
The last time they played in Jerry's World, I believe they faltered in a national championship game against Auburn.
Yeah.
But, Justin Herbert, he needs to show that he can perform in the big games. He's beaten the teams that he should beat. But other teams, Charlton, he struggled against. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the offensive lines on both teams and the defensive lines. But the bottom line is which quarterback will get the job done.
Yeah.
Will Justin Herbert be outdueled by a true freshman, Bo Nix?
Yeah, well, we'll see. I think Oregon gets that win. And if wrong, is it legal to eat eagles, Big C? I think they're on the endangered species list. So
well, you and I are not on this phone call, when you're talking about doing that. I don't have anything to do with it.
Okay, I'll eat the duck instead, Big C. I know a lot of people talk about some of the best teams in college football. And if you think about it, what are some of the top 10 toughest schedules? Everybody wants to know who's the top 10 ranked teams or who's the bottom teams. But when you think about earning your money, I'd ask you, why are so many small programs willing to go and play programs that have a budget that can surpass them, like 10-1, it seems, Portland State at Florida State. Let's look at some of the top 10 toughest schedules. And you don't have to agree with me, but I want to count down and just throw them out there and see what you think. I would say the number one would be South Carolina. A lot of people wouldn't think that, but would you agree that they maybe have one of the toughest schedules in the country? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you look at where they play alone, Charlton, playing in the SEC, playing in that Eastern Division where you have a number of ranked teams. Not only that, they play a non-conference schedule, Charlton, against a couple of solid programs.
Yeah.
They're not bringing in the cupcakes to play for money. So every week, Charlton, their players are challenged.
Yeah, always challenged. Now, speaking of challenge, and this is where I applaud the Pac-12 conference, I'm going to put Stanford up there because as an academic school, Stanford doesn't duck people. In fact, you rarely find them playing a program that no one's ever heard of. But give me your thoughts if you would agree that Stanford out of the Pac-12 would say maybe the toughest or one of the top schedules in the country. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you look at how they're starting off their season, they're starting off against Northwestern, a nationally ranked team. Find out how many teams that are ranked in the top 20 are playing nationally ranked teams. Stanford is coming right out of the box doing that, Charlton. Plus, they're going to play all the elite teams in the Pac-12 that are ranked right now. So they've handled their own year in and year out.
Well, I agree with that very much. So in another program, because they've carried the weight of the Pac-12, used to be the Pac-8, then the Pac-10, and now the Pac-12. Some people are thinking maybe Pac-16 coming up in the next 5 years. I don't know. But I still say the University of Southern California, the men of Troy, they have the best talent in the West Coast. Whether they win or not, I think it's part of system and coaching. Would you agree that they're one of the top schedules in the country, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, they have a top schedule, Charlton, but their talent that they have on the roster has not been able to produce. If you look at their record the past couple of years, it's been more of a downward slide there at USC. You have a schedule, and because of, lack of talent in-house, they haven't been able to play up to that level.
Let me bring to your mind Auburn. They're playing this weekend against Oregon. And Auburn, when you think about scheduling, you think in the SEC, Alabama must have the toughest schedule because they're the toughest team. Or how about Georgia? Or how about even Florida? But I would say Auburn's schedule is tougher than Alabama. It's tougher than Georgia. It's tougher than Florida, Big C. Your thoughts?
It is, Charlton. The Auburn Tigers, Gus Malzahn's on the hot seat. But, the fans don't always look at how tough the schedule is. But he's bringing his players in, Charlton, to play the best in the country. And this year they're going to have to produce. They got the true freshman quarterback.
Yep.
Can Bo Nix stand up to the pressure of having that top flight schedule?
Here's another guy with a really raspy voice, Ed Orgeron. But he has the LSU Tigers. They're primed. They have a big game coming up this year. But I want to get your thoughts on how they stack up as one of the toughest schedules. Again, people think Alabama or they think Georgia or sometimes Florida, because those are the teams that have won national championships recently, as well as Auburn. But give me your thoughts on LSU. I think they're one of the top schedules as well, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the ranked teams that are on their list, Ed Orgeron has done marvels out in Baton Rouge. He has a young quarterback in Joe Burrows, who's going to be a senior this year.
Yep.
Had one of the best passing attacks in LSU in some years, Charlton. LSU can withstand it. They have some of the greatest athletes in college football year in and year out, and they always play a tough schedule.
Yeah. They always do, and this year they have a chance to knock some people off. I know people aren't looking at them, but they could. Also, I would bring up Houston. We talked about Houston playing that game against Oklahoma. And I know this may seem like a long statement, but if I don't think Houston's going to win, but I think they'll play them close. They have a very tough schedule. Your thoughts?
They do have a tough schedule, Charlton. Not only that, with a new head coach and a new system offensively, but to have a veteran quarterback returning, that a guy before he got hurt was putting up about 43 points a game on the scoreboard. Houston is one of those teams they under the radar in Texas because you think of some of the bigger universities, Charlton.
Yep.
But they play all the big boys week in and week out.
Well, here's another team. Jimbo Fisher got $75 million. And Texas A&M, if you haven't been to Kyle Field and you haven't really been in a college football environment like that one, they have a chance, and it's not an outside chance. I think they have a very strong chance at knocking off Clemson. But if they do, can they ride out and win the rest of the SEC? So when you think about who they play in the SEC, plus they're going to Clemson, I think definitely A&M has one of the toughest schedules in the country. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about that. When you open up your non-conference schedule against the number one team in the country, that automatically puts you up there with one of the elite, tough schedules in the country.
Yep.
Not only that, you look at the guys in the SEC that you're playing, Charlton. There's no dogs in this side of the SEC.
Right.
They're going to have no less than 6 ranked teams that they play this year.
Yeah, I admire what they're doing down at A&M. UCLA, fight. Maybe they should play that band song more often for Chip Kelly and the good old boys down in Bruin Country, Big C. But they have a very difficult schedule. Your thoughts?
They do, and last night proved the start of the season was going to be difficult, Charlton, when they went down to Cincinnati and got manhandled down there.
Yep.
How demoralized will this team be, Charlton, in that next game? Because getting handled back-to-back opening games of the season by the same university, Charlton, UCLA, has a long road to go with this tough schedule.
They have a long road to go. Another team that plays in the big house. We talk about Appalachian State. They can put that on the mantle someplace that Appalachian State knocked off Michigan, but that was many, many moons ago. I think Michigan's back. Are they national championship contender? We'll find out, but they definitely have one of the top 10 toughest schedules. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about it, Charlton. They got to play Ohio State. They got to play Wisconsin. They got to play Penn State. They got a wealth of big talented teams. Purdue in that conference that they have to play just those alone.
Yeah.
Then their non-conference schedule, Charlton, they have a ranked team that they play in that. So they have a long, tough season ahead of them. But, Jim Harbaugh has had enough time to get his team ready for that schedule.
Yeah, definitely so. I look forward to it. I love the stripes on the helmet for the Wolverines. A team that everybody says is America's darling. They have touchdown Jesus. They have so many things going for them at Notre Dame. They have so much money. They spray paint the helmets before every game. And I think they play one of the most difficult schedules in the country, and oftentimes that's why they don't win national championships. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the teams that Notre Dame have to play, they have to play the likes of Georgia, USC, Stanford, Syracuse, Michigan State, Charlton. When you talk about a team that goes out every week and plays the best schedule that you can, they do that, Charlton. And you think about it, the second game of the season this year is going to be against Georgia. One of those teams is going to be eliminated from the college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Notre Dame could afford to lose, and the national media would try to pump them up again. I think if Georgia gets knocked off at home, that pushes them really far out of the conversation of national champions. I want to just jump over to the NFL for a moment here, and I want to think about some of the players that retire early, because we're all talking about the retirement of Andrew Luck as if it's never happened before. But think about it. How does his career compare to some other great players that retired early? Let's just take 5 of them. I would say Robert Smith, running back, Minnesota Vikings. He recorded 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and he led the NFC with 1,521 yards in the year 2000. Big C, he retired also at 28 years old, a year earlier than Andrew Luck. Your thoughts?
He did. He was one of the best running backs in the league, Charlton. He played in that high-powered offense in Minnesota, but he decided he wanted to walk away from the game while he could still walk.
Yeah.
And everybody felt he still had a lot of gas in the tank, but, Robert was a very intelligent man who was a medical student at Ohio State. He wanted to have that long career instead of that short career.
Very smart. It's a decision he chose to make. Number 4, I would say Otto Graham. If you think about Otto Graham, quarterback the Cleveland Browns, he retired in 1955. But he went to 10 straight championship games, and he won 7 of the last one his final season. Big C, your thoughts?
Otto Graham, as everybody talk about Tom Brady as being the GOAT. You think about this, 10 consecutive years being in the championship game in pro football.
Yeah.
Otto Graham first retired in 1954. Paul Brown talked him into coming out of retirement. He'd make him the highest paid player in pro football. He came out, Charlton, and went on and won his 7th championship in doing that, then retired after that season for good.
Yeah, and he was a smart guy. He knew what he was doing. Number 3, and a lot of people think you got to be carried off the field. Some people say you got to carry me off the field. And unfortunately, some guys are carried off the field because they get a torn kneecap or Achilles or whatever it happens to be. But Calvin Johnson, wide receiver, Detroit Lions, Johnson set the NFL records for receiving yards, 1,984, and that was back in 2012. But think about this, 5,137 yards from 2011 to 2013. They're the most by any player during a 3-year stretch in league history. He retired in 2015. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Calvin said, I've had enough of this game. I can leave on my own. And there was a lot of vitriol against Calvin when he retired. Everybody said, how can he dare walk away from the game making all the money that he does?
Yeah.
He was happy with his career. His accomplishments, Charlton, still stand today in the NFL.
Yeah, and it's just great when players have enough money and enough presence of mind to know they have a second career. They don't have to stand there and get beaten up so much and taking all the painkillers that people do just to play in the game. I think about this name that's synonymous with football in the universe. That's the great Jim Brown. The Cleveland Browns, having led the league in rushing with 1,544 yards in 1965. Brown left the game to get into acting, and you think about this, as the league's all-time leading rusher, I think he only made $60,000 his final year. When he went into acting, he made $100,000+. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Jim Brown left to go over to Italy, Charlton, that offseason after leading the NFL in rushing. And Paul Brown told him if he wasn't going to be in training camp that he was going to fine him $1,500 a day.
Yeah.
Jim Brown said, okay, I'll just retire. And when he retired, he was the game's all-time leading rusher, Charlton, only playing 9 seasons in the NFL. He led the NFL in rushing 8 of those 9 seasons and amassed over 12,000 yards during that short career.
And that's amazing that after all that time, you think about players like the great Gale Sears, and you think about guys like Jim Brown, and I think this is important, what I'm going to say. they were dominant on the field, but they also had to be dominant outside of the game because they didn't have the easiest walk through life as people of color. So I really appreciate them for that as much as their dominance on the athletic field. But I would say the number one guy who retired early of all the players in the universe in the NFL, that would be the great Barry Sanders, running back Detroit Lions. In his 10 seasons with the Lions, Sanders was the most exciting running back in the NFL. He averaged over 1,500 yards per season. In 1999, he retired just before a training camp, less than 1,500 yards away from the NFL's all-time leading rusher, and that's by the great Jim Brown. Could you imagine? He retired with 1 season of work left in front of him to set the record. He probably could have played another 5 years, but his health was more important than that 1,500 yards, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, actually, at the time, Walter Payton was the league's leading rusher when he was just less than 1,500 yards away from breaking the great Walter Payton's all-time leading rushing record at that time. But Barry was averaging that many yards a season, and everyone felt that he could have easily broken the record. But Barry felt it was time to walk away from the game, to get on with life, and that's what's been the common denominator, Charlton, between those 5 great individuals that you talked about. They wanted to move on with their lives. And when it's time for an NFL team to get rid of a player, there's no fanfare about that. There's no parades. There's no ticker tape. There's no medals passed out. They just cut you and said, thanks for your services.
Yep.
When these great athletes turn to flip the coin on the NFL and said, hey, we appreciate the time that you gave us, but it's time for me to move on, the media doesn't always appreciate that because they say that an athlete is not prescient enough to make his own future decisions.
That's true. And so that's just our opinion. People can have their own thoughts about it. But I just appreciate when people have put together a plan in life to have something to do after football. And I also want to finish up with some news that just came out today. And I know people talk about what they want to talk about. Major League Baseball, the tragedy that happened with Tyler Skaggs, that he passed away down for the Angels. They were down in Texas playing a baseball game a couple months ago. And it was disclosed today that he passed away from an overdose of drugs, alcohol, oxycodone, fentanyl was in his system. He was only 27 years old. And I know we were just talking earlier, Big C, earlier in the week about Manfred came out and had a statement to Major League Baseball players about taking over-the-counter performance enhancers, whatever it is. Now, I don't know, and I know, again, you have to grieve for the man and his parents. I know they're trying to blame someone in the Angels organization. Unless they tied his hands and forced the drugs on him, you can't blame somebody else. It's something we always say. Nobody's perfect, but we got to stop blaming other people when we ingest the drugs into our own bodies, and we can't say my friend made me do it, or some trainer made me do it, or some bad boy made me do it. Big C, that I know that may sound insensitive, but everyone can close their mouth and not put the needle in the body or not put the drug in their mouth. We can't blame other people. That make any sense?
Well, this is a 2-level problem when you look at it. It shows the lack of control by Major League Baseball in their drug testing program. But it also shows that, and I saw the statement that the family made said this was not in his character. No, it was his character. He was an under-the-table drug addict is what it was. You got fentanyl, you got oxycodone, and you're drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
As a baseball player, you're not suffering through the pains that a football player or a hockey player is going through every night.
Yeah.
You became a recreational drug addict, and it cost you your life. And I listened at the networks describe it as an accidental overdose.
It's not accidental.
I remember the great John Belushi, who was on Saturday Night Live and did a few movies with Dan Aykroyd. They were the Blues Brothers.
Yep.
And, everyone called, they didn't call his death an accidental suicide, but when it comes to an athlete, it's an accident. And everybody's looking to blame somebody else. You have to blame the individual. You're put in front of enough advisors as a professional athlete to know the do's and don'ts of legal and illegal drugs.
Yeah.
The fentanyl and oxycodone, he didn't have a prescription for them, Charlton, so he was obtaining these things illegally. Because if he had a prescription, they would have known what to look for right off the bat.
Yep. And
so he was out there obtaining drugs illegally. So when people say, well, it was an accidental overdose, and that was not in his character to use fentanyl and oxycodone and drink alcohol, I think that's a smokescreen that's being said. No one wants to see anyone young die tragically, Charlton.
No.
But this should be a wake-up call to Rob Manfred and the rest of the Major League, Charlton, that you need to put in a more stern drug testing policy.
You know, I think about guys that have dealt with things. There was an article that came out about Lawrence Taylor, the Hall of Fame linebacker, and he talked about how he had substance abuse problems, and so many other players have talked about that over the years. And I think it's tragic, obviously. It's tragic. But because it's tragic, everybody has to talk about it. Because I've yet to find any parent that says, well, I don't want to talk about it in front of my kids because I don't want them to be afraid, or I don't want to encourage them to get into it. No, if that man or anybody that's taking drugs now under the table in secrecy because they don't want people to know it, you got to know the consequences. I'm not sounding goody two-shoes. For my own children, I tell them, there's some things I can't help you with. You're going to be around people that will introduce drugs to you. They will be the people you know. It's not some guy behind a grocery cart at a grocery store. There's people that you know. But if you choose to do it, then I can't help you. And that's the truth, Big C. We can't keep blaming somebody else because we didn't tell that message strong enough to people we love, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, that's the story that's being told, Charlton, is that they're trying to make the young man the victim. Yes, he's a victim of his own weakness when it comes to that. Because you're a millionaire professional athlete, and you figure that you have to go into the dark alleys for recreational enjoyment, Charlton. That's what's wrong.
Yeah.
We talk about the National Suicide Hotline number every night. There's a guy who needed help. He wouldn't even reach out, nor would his friends reach out. I guarantee you that people on the team knew what he was doing.
Oh, yeah.
But he also knew what he was doing. And if he knew he had a problem, Charlton, that National Suicide Prevention Hotline number was there to call for some help.
Yeah, and one more thing I'll say on that before we get into tonight's schedule. And I tell my kids this all the time because you can't love anybody more than you love yourself but your children. There are people who will sacrifice their own lives for their children. At some point in time, the people giving anybody drugs, they're people you know. And they don't give a damn about you. And you know that. So don't sit back and hide people that are giving you that crap. You got to be bold enough to keep your own life important. Big C, Cincinnati Reds rookie Enrico broke the National League rookie mark for homers in a month with his 14th in August. Aquino hit a 2-run homer in the first for the Cincinnati Reds and a 2-out RBI single in the 8th. And he led Cincinnati to a 4-3 win over the Marlins. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, every week it seems like, Charlton, that we got another rookie setting some type of milestone in Major League Baseball. This lets us know that baseball is going to be healthy in the years to come because we have so many young players with an infusion of talent in this great historical game, Charlton, that nobody's backing down. I mean, we all grew up knowing players, knowing certain names that we all reveled about, Charlton. But the new young bats at Charlton lining up and just knocking the ball out of the park.
Yeah, they're hitting the ball out of the park. And everybody has to just you got to stay focused in this game of baseball. Coming into the month of September, you'll see more separation with things that happen in sports. And just like one more thing I want to bring up. I know that we talked about DeMarcus Cousins yesterday and what happened, how he had the arrest warrant out for him, and everybody gets on Cousins, and me included, because I don't excuse him. I think sometimes he's very macabre. No matter how many good things he does, I would hate that someone with that mentality get made excuses for. But mainstream did not talk about former New York Mets second baseman Wally Berkman, who was also arrested Friday morning and charged with domestic violence in Riverhead, New York. But they did with Marcus Cousins. The only difference is one is Caucasian, one is African American. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the thing with Bergman, it wasn't an arrest warrant issued. He was arrested on the spot, Charlton, because of domestic violence against his wife.
Yeah.
And you think about that, whenever an African-American athlete is dealt with this type of situation, Charlton, we've seen it in the NFL and other sports. They've been suspended. They've been cut. They've lost their jobs. I'm wondering how the Mets will handle Bergman's situation, Charlton, because, yes, it is a national spotlight. He's the manager of one of their minor league AAA teams, Charlton.
Yep.
Will they dismiss him from this organization? Because as we've seen the treatment of African Americans, whenever there's domestic violence comes around and one of them gets arrested, Charlton,
it's on the news.
You're automatically released from a team.
Yeah, and it's all over the news. So they didn't do anything. They tried to hide it, Big C. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. If you have a TV set at your home, you can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast Television. And I really love the app by Alexa. Just say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the support of our sponsors. I want to just get into Major League Baseball schedule tonight and going into this beautiful holiday weekend. Tragedy, we can learn from it, Big C, but you gotta really want to learn from it. Anybody out there dealing in drugs, don't call it an accident if something happens to you. You knew the consequences before you did the action. And the people that give it to you, think twice. Are they really someone who loves you? I don't think anyone who loves you would give you that garbage. Tonight, Miami at Washington, Oakland at the New York Yankees. What a series. Maybe a preview of baseball in the playoffs. New York Mets at Philadelphia. Houston at Toronto. You have Cleveland at Tampa Bay. Minnesota at Detroit. Chicago at Atlanta. Seattle's at Texas. Baltimore's at Kansas City. And another big game in the Midwest, Cincinnati at St. Louis, followed by Pittsburgh at Colorado. The LA Dodgers at Arizona, and they really got to get right down in LA, Big C. Boston at the Los Angeles Angels, San Diego at San Francisco, and Milwaukee at Chicago in a matchup game. So I know that we talk about so much stuff that we're passionate about. And it's a sad dog that won't wag his own tail. And again, thoughts and prayers can only go so far. If you have the chance to say that your kids are alive now, not crying when something tragic happens, not wanting to blame somebody else. We raise our own children. Sometimes children don't listen. But at the same time, let's quit telling our children if they choose to do bad behavior that is somebody else's fault. Big C, does that make any sense?
Well, Charlton, this is what I always talk about in parenting. You have to communicate with your kids. You got to talk with your kids. You got to teach your kids how to read, so that they can know what's in front of them. And if they don't know exactly what it is, maybe they can research it. They can Google it now. They don't have to pull out a dictionary as they once used to do when I was young.
Yep.
But this is what education is. We all talk about getting to the next level in sports. But, you know, it's ironic when they announced what happened to this young man, Charlton Skaggs, down in Anaheim, that Johnson & Johnson just lost the hugest lawsuit in the state of Oklahoma, I believe it was,
yeah,
that a judge awarded, against them.
Yeah.
For oxycodone, Charlton. You know, the major leagues have to look into this, because if it's in the major leagues and it's in all professional sports, then where does it go from there? It goes to college and it goes to high school. You talk a lot about high school football and AAU basketball, Charlton. Those players, they sit there and they idolize these professionals.
Yeah.
You can see it on what they wear, how they dress, how they want to look, their mannerism. So if they know that these professional athletes are dealing in these illicit, illegal drugs, Charlton, then they're going to want to experiment with it. So we talk about role models as athletes. We have to be role models in life. Forget about the damn athletes. You got to be role models in life. You got to start at home with the parents. Don't expect for the athlete to raise your child. But if you raise them as a parent and you teach them to follow the right guidelines, then they can become that athlete you want them to be.
And a final thought. When people say, I can't believe Andrew Luck walked away. Well, Andrew Luck works for an owner that also has some Oxycontin on him when he was arrested, the owner. And he still owns the team in Indianapolis Colts. People don't know what Andrew was having to take so he could even walk. They don't know that. So people, it's just easy to point the finger at somebody, but we all know what we put into our bodies. And you got to know the consequences before you do it. Big C, I look forward to all the great football. I'm going to say that Oregon's going to knock off Auburn. You're thinking it's going to be the other way around. We'll find out. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Charlton, I know with all the college football that's going on, everybody's got their eyes glued to the tube, but I'm looking at Flushing Meadows in New York. I'm looking at the men's and women's side of what's going on there. I'm looking for Naomi Osaka and Coco Gauff matchup, Charlton. Also, Roger Federer has made it to the fourth round there at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, he's knocked off Daniel Evans 6'2", 6'2", and 6'1". And you can knock people off, too, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America, and Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.